Saving America one entrepreneur at a time. It's the Biz Wrap Podcast with your host, Michael Manahan.
It's Biz Wrap Radio, the show that celebrates entrepreneurs and small business with your host, small businessman, educator, and author, Michael Manahan.
And welcome to another edition of Biz Wrap Radio. It's your host, Michael Manahan. Thank you so much for joining me today. If you are new to Biz Wrap Radio, we are the show all about small business people and entrepreneurs. We're here trying to help you, the entrepreneurs of America, the small business people of America, do what you need to do. You need to get out there and make money. Yes, it's called profits, and believe me, profit is not a dirty word. It's what you're supposed to do as a businessman. Why do you need to make profits? Well, you reinvest it in your own business. You take care of yourself. You take care of your family. You take care of your employees. And you invest it in the community. And that's what small business people have been doing in America since this country was founded. Most people in the United States work for a small business. Most new jobs are created by small business. And yet sometimes small business people get overlooked. I mean, we just finished an election cycle here. We heard plenty from Hillary and from Donald on all sorts of different issues under the sun. Anybody hear them talk about small business? Anybody hear them say, well, I want to make it easier for the little guy down the street to create a new business? I didn't hear a lot of talk about that. And that really concerns me because we don't seem to have the attention of the people who make all the rules and regulations out there. You know, it's almost like you've got people developing rules and regulations without actually talking to the people who are playing the game. Seems all the rules and regulations are designed by the big banks and the big corporations and the fat cats on Wall Street. And the little guy out there, the 30 million small business people in the United States, we're all just kind of forgotten. But we're not forgetting about you here at Biz Wrap Radio. We realize that we need you. We need you desperately. And hopefully through this program and our efforts at Biz Wrap Radio and the Biz Wrap organization, we are going to help you do a better job of what you're trying to do, which is either to grow your own business or perhaps create a new enterprise and perhaps give up that job, working for some big corporation whereby, you can do everything right. You've performed exceptionally 100%, 110%. But, some guy up in the boardroom screwed up. He made a bad decision. He opened a division down in Brazil. The corporation just lost $500 million. And guess what? You're getting canned. Meanwhile, he's getting a bonus and heading off out to some ritzy restaurant in New York City to spend $500 on dinner. That's life, my friends, in these United States of America. So let's see what we can do to help entrepreneurs. That's what the show is all about. And I've got somebody who's joined me as a guest today who's going to really be able to help you as an entrepreneur. His name is Scott Duffy. He is an entrepreneur himself. He's a speaker, a business coach, a best-selling author, and he worked with Tony Robbins. And his resume, it's about as long as my left arm. So I'm not going to take the thunder away from him. I'm just going to welcome him to the show. Scott, thanks for being on the show today.
It's awesome to be here. I'm a huge fan of the show.
Well, thank you. So you just give us a little bit. You got such a varied background. I don't want to read it all here. Just tell us a little bit about your background and how you got to where you are today.
Well, I'm a Southern California guy. I grew up in L.A., went to school at the University of San Diego, and I started my first business as a freshman in college when I was 18. And it's kind of a funny story how it happened. Back at that time, I got some really great advice from a family member. And what they told me is, on your first day of school, your first day of college, what you need to do is go to the career counseling department. And when you're there, find out who runs it and let them know that you really want to get a great internship that following summer and to keep their eyes open for you. And this relative said, really work hard to build a great relationship with this person and maybe something, cool will happen. So I did that, built a great relationship, and about 6 months later, I get a call. And it's the guy at the career counseling department. He's like, hey, Scott, he's like, you got to come to school. I got something for you. So back in the day, like, an awesome internship was like working for Microsoft, FedEx, IBM, Hewlett-Packard. And so I'm thinking to myself, which one of these guys is it? And so when I sit down, I said, which one? And here's what he told me. He said this, AAA student painters. And I'm like, what? AAA student painters? He's like, it's student painters. And I said, you got to be kidding me. And here's what he told me. He said, Scott, he said, I think that you have got a lot of entrepreneur in you. And he said, what these guys are going to do is they're a franchise, and they're going to teach you how to write a business plan and how to build a team and how to manage, revenue and income and expenses and things like that. And he said, in the long run, I think it'll really pay off for you. And I did it. It was probably the best experience I've ever had.
Now, were you out there painting houses?
I was like knocking on doors and like leaving things on your front door with like a paintbrush saying, give us students a call and we'll paint your home or your office. And, we had different crews. I think I had like 4 crews at one time that would be painting houses down in San Diego. And the thing is, we talk about success and failure, right? And as entrepreneurs, what's going to happen is we're going to fail, so many more times than we're going to ever succeed. We learn from all those failures. And in my experience, that painting business was a total disaster. I mean, I overspent. I did everything you could possibly do wrong. I did wrong. But the thing is, it created those lessons, really created a foundation for me, which I was able to use to really, I think, as a springboard later on in my life.
Okay, so let me interrupt and ask a question, because you mentioned something that is really dear to the whole, I think, idea of entrepreneurship. And I'm sure there's many people listening out there who are saying, I'd love to really go out and try and start my own business, but I am petrified of failure. What happens if it doesn't succeed? I mean, my friends, my family, my business associates, everybody thinks I'm going to be will think I'm a schmuck or an idiot. What recommendation, what suggestion do you have for entrepreneurs?
Well, here's the thing. I used to think that the most important job of every entrepreneur, it was things like learning how to write a great plan or how to build a great team or develop an awesome culture, or just it's all about execution. And what I learned is none of that stuff. I mean, that stuff's important and you can teach all that stuff, but it's not the most important thing. The most important thing for every entrepreneur is this. It's to learn how to protect yourself. So if things take longer than planned, they don't go as planned, they go sideways, that's okay. You've protected yourself and you can bounce right back. Now, the reality is that most startups, most businesses do fail. It's some crazy percentage, like, 98%, in the first 5, 6, 7 years. So again, there's a great chance that you, who's listening, you're going to be successful and you're going to crush it. There's also, there's a chance it might not work. So what we have to do is, number one, we have to make sure that we have protected ourselves. We've mitigated our risk financially. And you see, the biggest mistake that entrepreneurs make in this area is that here's what they do. They decide that they're gonna start a business, and they're like super passionate about it. And so they get started. And they put together a very simple financial projection. Here's where my income's going to come from. Here's where my expenses are going to be. This is, what I'm going to make or lose every single month. Here's how I'm going to start generating cash that will be able to pay for this thing. But what typically happens is we get into the business and we learn that this thing just takes longer than we expected, or it's harder than we expected, or there's just other factors that come into play. And so we continue to spend. Now, the mistake that we've made is we run that entire business and we do all that spending out of our primary checking account. Mm-hmm. And so one day what happens is we tend to we get so caught up in the process, and we believe so much in our vision and in ourselves that we keep spending until eventually what happens is you lose track. And then one day you get like that bill, or you open up your bank statement and you find that there's nothing there. not just for the business, but like for you to pay the mortgage or the rent. And so what's really important, what I always say is this: you want to protect yourself, here's what you do. It's really simple. On day one in business, you have to open a business checking account. That's number one, open a business checking account. Number two, you have to determine at that time exactly how much financial risk you're willing to take. Whether it's, you're going to take some of your savings, you're going to cash out an IRA, what you're going to do is you're going to take some money that you earn in your paycheck, and you're going to do an automatic transfer every month into this account to help fund your idea.
Okay, Scott.
Whatever it is on day one, what you have to do is put all that money there.
Okay, Scott. I need
Yeah.
to hold you right there because we got to go to commercial break. I tell you.
Oh, go for it. Yeah.
Time goes so quickly. We're talking to Scott Duffy, entrepreneur, speaker, business coach, and we're going to be back, Biz Rap Radio, right after these messages. And welcome back to Biz Rap Radio. It's your host, Michael Manahan. Thank you so much for sticking with us today. We are talking today with Scott Duffy. He's an entrepreneur, a speaker, a business coach, and we're talking about entrepreneurial failure and how this is something that a lot of entrepreneurs face, and they sometimes are afraid of it. And Scott was giving us a few strategies as to kind of how we might handle that. And I think we were talking about kind of limiting our risk on an entrepreneurial venture. So I think I cut you off right in the middle of your thoughts, but do you want to continue on that vein?
Sure. So what we were talking about was limiting our financial risk. So if things, didn't work out as planned, you protected yourself financially, and you could bounce right back. And what we had said is on your first day of business, what you need to do is open a business checking account. You're going to determine how much money you're willing to risk in this thing, and you're going to put it all there on day one. That's what you're going to do. If you have to cash out the IRA, you do that. If you move it from your checking or your savings, you do that. Because here's what happens. Once you move all of that money into a separate account, now, number one, you've separated your risk, but number two, it becomes real. What happens is you begin to act less impulsively, right? And you really understand when you see that account getting low, like you have a better understanding of, when you might need to make, some important decisions about whether to keep this thing going or to whether to stop it. So again, number one is you've got to separate your financial risk. And it's something that most entrepreneurs don't do. But if you're concerned that and maybe your fear of something not working out is what's holding you back from living your passion and going out there and chasing your dream. Just do this one thing and you'll be 98% ahead of everybody else, and you will have protected yourself.
So let's talk about something else that's associated with failure. And I have been in this situation so many times as a consultant, as an advisor to companies. I've worked with, I think now probably over 150 management teams in my career. Somebody approaches you with a business, and they say, "Mike, we need your advice. What are your thoughts? What do we need to do?" And you look at the business up and down, backwards and forwards, and you say, "These guys need to shut this thing down. This thing is never going to work. Why are they even bothering?" And yet sometimes entrepreneurs just don't know when to call it quits. They don't know when to say, "You know what, we gotta scrap this whole thing and start at the beginning or try something else." How do you determine when enough is enough?
Well, the way you determine enough is enough financially is by taking a look at that business checking account and really deciding whether or not you want to risk more. Again, it's a really powerful tool. But what I try and share with entrepreneurs is this idea. It's that when you're out there asking for help and surrounding yourself with, hopefully the right people to help you to build your business, you have to pay attention to whether or not these people are providing opinion or counsel. Now, opinion is, when somebody, maybe with the best intentions and with an amazing heart, really tells you what they think you should do, but they don't have any direct experience in that particular thing. right? Versus counsel. Counsel comes from people that have actually walked in your shoes or the shoes that you want to fill. And so, again, you really have to make sure who it is that you're listening to and make sure that you're getting really good counsel. I would say that it's incredibly important that we surround ourselves with people that again, have kind of like walked the path that we want to walk, but also that are willing to be open with us, honest with us, and not just tell us everything that we want to hear. And the reason that this is important is it is really doggone tough as an entrepreneur to know when it's time to quit. I've been there myself. In fact, I think if you talk to a room of 100 entrepreneurs, multi-company entrepreneurs, I would bet that if you ask them what's the biggest mistake that you've made as an entrepreneur, I would bet that most of the room would say, I stayed in something too long. So again, if you polled the room and you asked, well, how do you not make that mistake again? What they would probably tell you is, I surrounded myself with people that really knew this space. Mm-hmm. I surrounded myself with people that were willing to be honest with me and have a look in my eyes and really give me gut checks when I needed them.
Mm-hmm. So let's talk about this for a minute, because you mentioned right people. From an entrepreneurial perspective, how important is the team? I mean, we think of an entrepreneur as kind of this bold figure that's dashing out into the world and making everything happen by him or herself. But how important is it for an entrepreneur to actually have a team and people, I guess, in the canoe rowing in the same direction?
Yeah, I mean, so here's the thing. At the end of the day, you are nothing more and nothing less than the average of the 5 people that you spend the most time with. And if you don't believe me, just like do this simple exercise. What I want you to do is just think about this and write down the names of the 5 people that you spend the most time with. Okay, the 5 people that you spend the most time with. And then right next to each one of those names, write down what you think they earn. So the names of those people, what they earn. Then add it all up, those 5 numbers, and divide by 5. Divide by those 5 people. And the odds are, plus or minus about 5%, that is exactly what you earn.
Wow,
it's crazy. Try it.
I hesitate to try that. I'm going to be in for a real shock if I try that. That's so. I guess the message there is that part of success is actually associating with other successful people.
You are what you eat. You are who you surround yourself with.
So,
the reason this is so important to an entrepreneur is, number one, you can apply that lesson to any area of your life. Uh-huh. But number two, if you want to build $1 million company, you need to be spending your time with people that have built $1 million companies. If you want to build a $10 million a year company and you're around a bunch of people that have built $1 million a year companies, I can tell you right now, you're not going to get there. Uh-huh. Until you change your circle. And so the people we spend our time with are incredibly important.
Well, this leads me to another question. I live in Southern California. You're in Southern California, correct? I moved here 30 years ago. I was a naive immigrant from the hinterlands of Canada. And something I discovered that here in Southern California anyway, it might not be the same in Oklahoma City, but here in Southern California, there are, a lot of very successful people, but there are a ton of people who are presenting the image that they are successful. Their lease on their $100,000 Mercedes, they're 3 months behind on their lease on their $100,000 Mercedes Benz. You know, their credit cards are maxed out to buy the most expensive jewelry for their hot girlfriend, and they lead you to believe that they're multimillionaires and that they've been tremendously successful, and they're just nothing but phonies. How do you weed out the phonies in this world?
Well, what's really cool about hiring and choosing the people to surround yourself with is it's like really the only part of business where we have perfect information if we go and we do our homework. So what I do is, here's the thing, a person's track record is their track record. And if you're going to bring somebody into your circle or into your business, you can't trust that person. You need to sit down and you need to do your own homework. You have to call their references. You have to go onto LinkedIn. This is a really powerful tool that I use. If I'm talking to somebody about doing a business deal, what I do, I have a pretty big network, and I have a pretty big network on LinkedIn, is I'll go on LinkedIn and I'll see if I'm connected to that person. And if I'm not, I connect. And then what I do is I find out who our mutual connections are. And I start to poke around a little bit. Number one, I want to find out what kind of people is that person surrounding themselves with, right? Mm-hmm. So I want to find out the person I'm interviewing, what they do, and I also find out the people that we're connected to, like what they do. So that's really important. If I know the person well, and I feel I can pick up the phone and make a call, I'll make a call, never do it over email. And I'll ask questions just about your experience working with or dealing with that person. So I think doing our homework is so important. And entrepreneurs blow this all the time, because here's what happens. We have a business. We're super passionate. Every entrepreneur I know is incredibly resource constrained when they get started. And it doesn't matter if it's the person starting for the first time or it's Richard Branson. Nobody I know that's successful started with all the resources they needed. Instead, they knew the difference between having resources and being resourceful. And they learned how to acquire the things that they needed each and every step of the way. And so what happens is entrepreneurs, they're so busy, they're juggling so many balls, they're trying so hard that when it's finally time to hire, number one, they don't put together a really good job description, so they're not really sure what it is they need and what they're looking for.
Okay, Scott, I got to hold you off for that next idea, because we are up again against a commercial break. It is Mike Manahan, Biz Rap Radio. I'm talking with Scott Duffy, entrepreneur, speaker, and business coach. We're talking about entrepreneurship and some of the things you can do as an entrepreneur to be more successful. But right now, we got to go to commercials, and we're going to be back with more right after these messages. And welcome back to Biz Rap Radio. It's Mike Manahan. We are talking to today Scott Duffy. He is an entrepreneur, speaker, business coach. Very interesting person. And again, Scott, thank you so much for being on the show today.
You got it.
And we were just talking before we went to break about, the importance of team and people. And you were talking about, if you're going to bring somebody into the organization, that one of the things that's really important is having a good job description, I guess, really the expectations of what you want that person to do. And I kind of interrupted you as we went to commercial break. But do you want to continue with those thoughts?
Well, sure. Where we left off is that, as entrepreneurs, we get so busy, we get so wrapped up, and there's so many balls that we're juggling, that when it comes to hiring, we tend to blow it. And the reason that we blow it is that number one, we don't put together a complete job description. So we don't know exactly what it is that we're looking for. And by the way, neither does anyone else. And what I mean by that is the easiest way to find people for your to help with your business is through word of mouth and through your network. And if you go to somebody and you say, I'm looking for a marketing person, if you know a marketing person looking for work, just send them my way. That doesn't help anybody. What kind of marketing person do you want? Do you want somebody that is a brand advertiser? Do you want somebody that can do digital marketing? Do you want somebody that is a specialist at lead generation? So it's really important we get really clear on what our descriptions are. And what's interesting is the clearer that we get, the easier it always is to hire. And so that's number one. Number two, the mistake that we make is we're so busy that what we do is when we find somebody, we tend to go with our gut. And the problem with an entrepreneur going with their gut is it's typically influenced by how busy they are and a lot of the wrong factors. And so what we do is we find somebody that we like, and people who are like each other tend to like each other. And instead of digging in and giving them a good job description or taking a look at their references or any of those things, we just hire them and they get started. And so what tends to happen with a lot of early stage companies is they're like revolving doors, because we're not finding the right people and they're cycling out of the business constantly. If you just sit down and you take the time required up front, again, the job description, to do the homework on the person, and you make the right hire, I mean, it is incredible the gains that you will get for your business
Wow.
and the stability that
Yeah.
you'll be able to create.
It makes me think of one of my clients. I have a client who, the company's, successful by, I would think, most terms. It's an entrepreneurial company. I don't want to say too much about it because for confidentiality reasons. But this company put in a 401k plan. Now, the company's been around since probably about 9 years. They put in a 401k plan. They've got somewhere around 25 employees. And the requirement was to be eligible for the 401k plan, you had to work for the company for 1 year or more. That was kind of, otherwise you couldn't participate in the 401k plan. Now, there's 3 owners in the company. So in addition to the 3 owners, there are 4 employees who are eligible to work or to join the 401k plan. Out of 25 employees, only 4 of them have been there longer for 1 year. And this is a company that's been around for 9 years. So clearly this company is demonstrating exactly what you're talking about. They're a revolving door, which hurts continuity in their business because they're constantly bringing in new people. And again, one of the things I've discovered about them is they do this very haphazard hiring. I mean, it's they'll meet somebody at the fitness club or they'll meet somebody at the bar. Hey, do you want a job? And the next thing you know, these people are working for the company. So I really think what you're saying there is really, really good. Plus, I like the idea of really describing the job because I know what you're talking about. People will say, I need to hire and they give the job title rather than what they want the person to do. Like, I need to hire a controller. Right. My background is finance, so I talk a lot about financial jobs. I need to hire a controller. Well, the job that a controller does in a $5 million a year company is completely different than the job a controller does in a $500 million company. What exactly do you want this controller to do? So I really understand that. That's great information. Scott, one of the things that I'm interested in a lot of, I know people who talk to me, is how do we build a great company in today's market? I mean, today's markets are so competitive, innovation happens so quickly, competition comes into the market so fast. How do you build a great company? Do you have any thoughts or ideas?
Well, the best way is to start with one hammer and one nail. And here's what I mean. If I were to give you a hammer, one hammer and one nail, and your job is simple, all you have to do is take that hammer and take that nail and drive that nail into a piece of wood. Like, really nail that one business. Now, the odds are you may miss the first time, you may miss the second time, but eventually I'll bet that you're going to nail it. So let's say I give you 2 hammers and 2 nails. You got a problem. Like, you got to hold the hammers. Who's going to hold the nails? Let's say we find somebody crazy enough to do it. You have to think about it. You're holding both hammers, one in each hand. You have to bring them both back at the same time, and you have to strike at the same time. And the odds are you're going to miss the first, the second, the third time. You may never get it right. Let's say you do 10 hammers and 10 nails. You get the point.
Mm-hmm.
The number one biggest mistake that entrepreneurs make is they focus on too many things at one time. And again, I call that hammers and nails syndrome. So if you want to build a successful business in today's economy, in today's world, here's what you do. You don't focus on everything. You focus on one thing. And it doesn't have to be the hardest. It should be the simplest. What I always call the minimum viable product. Really nail that one thing first. And then what you do, move on to the next. And how do you figure out what you focus on next? Well, instead of creating this big product roadmap, what you do is you ask the people who are using the product, ideally people who are paying for the product, what it is that they like and what they don't, and what they want you to build for them. I mean, I had a buddy who I used to work with when I worked for Tony Robbins, and this guy was amazing. And he went out a couple years ago, and he raised $2 million on an idea to build an internet company. Like $2 million on an idea. That's a lot of money.
Yeah, that
right?
is. Wow,
that's a lot of money in any
for
market.
him. Yeah.
So here's the thing: he was solving one problem for one person, and it was a really simple, elegant solution. About 6 months later, or six months ago, I ran into this guy, and it was really interesting because I asked him. I said, "How's the company doing?" And he said, "Dude, it just so happens you caught me. I'm on my way to my attorney's office to go shut the thing down.
Wow.
And I'm like, how is that possible? You had so much money. And here's what he told me. He said this. He said, when we got started, we were solving one problem for one person. And that's all that we were going to do. We raised money on that idea. But as soon as the money hit the account, every day we had somebody else in the company walk in with another big idea, another shiny object. And he said, and as a result, we kept building and building and building and building and building. He said, until we basically ran through all of our cash. And then what we did is we pushed the product live and we went to market. But here's what we learned. We learned when we went live that 95% of our users only used 5% of our site. And so if you reverse engineer that, 95% of this company's time and money was spent building stuff that nobody wanted.
Wow.
And the funny thing,
that's a great lesson.
The funny thing, just to wrap it up,
okay,
is that 5% was the original thing he was going to build.
Isn't that always the way? It is Mike Manahan. I'm here with Scott Duffy, Biz Rap Radio. We're going to be back right after these messages. And welcome back again to Biz Rap Radio. I'm your host, Michael Manahan. Thank you so much for sticking with us today. I'm on today talking with Scott Duffy, entrepreneur, speaker, and business coach. And Scott, once again, thanks for being on the show.
Great to be here.
And we've talked about some very interesting things. We've talked about how to handle failure. We've talked about getting the right people in your organization. We've talked about how to focus on doing certain things in your business. But before we go any further, I want you to have the opportunity to give out your information. What if a listener is interested in contacting you or finding out more about what you're up to?
Well, they can always go to my website, which is at www.scottduffy, SCOTTDUFFY.com. They can send me an email. Great way to get a hold of me at connect, CONNECT, at scottduffy.com. And finally, I have a show. It is a video podcast. It's sponsored by Microsoft, and it's called Business and Burgers.
Wow,
and
that's
Business
cool.
and Burgers isn't that fun?
Yeah, that's a cool. Now, do you actually eat burgers while you're talking about business?
I do. So Business and Burgers is a search for the best burger in America.
Wow.
And a side of tasty business advice. And my buddy and I, Alan Taylor, we hit one new city every month. And we go to the top restaurants, brew houses, and pubs. And while we're there, we sit down with entrepreneurs and we talk about the lessons that they've learned in business over amazing burgers and fries. So check us out at businessandburgers.com.
Businessandburgers.com. Cool. I'm going to check that out. That sounds really, really, really neat. Scott, before we went to commercial break, you were talking about the company, or I think it was a friend of yours, and he kept developing his business beyond kind of the core focus. And I've experienced that as well with clients of mine. And I call it the you could do this syndrome, where a company goes out, particularly a company's looking for raising money. They'll go out and they've got their core market and their core product, and it's pretty well defined. And they sit down in front of some money guy, and the money guy listens to their pitch. And whether or not the money guy's willing to put up any money, the money guy's got a plethora of suggestions. Well, have you thought about doing this? And have you thought about doing that? And do you know your product, which is designed for, the plumbing market, you could use that in the electrical market. And all of a sudden, these guys are going back and rewriting their entire business plan to add all of these could-dos to it. And then it takes away from the focus and the concentration on what they were really trying to accomplish in the first place. And then eventually they get to the stage where people are confused about really what their core business is, because they're trying to do so many things and get involved in so many markets. So your advice on that is very good, but I bring it up in the context of trying to raise capital. And I know a lot of our listeners are trying to raise capital for their businesses. So do you have any, with the about 6 minutes we have left here, any advice for people who are out there trying to raise money?
Sure. When it comes to raising money, the number one reason that people fail is that they're talking to all the wrong people. And here's what I mean. When we're out there prospecting for investors, we have to understand this. Investors are in the business of making money. And in order to make money and protect themselves from risk, what they do is they typically have, whether it's conscious, and professional investors always have a conscious plan, or it's like an unconscious thing for folks that aren't professional investors, but maybe friends and family that might put money into your deal. They all have a set of criteria, things that they follow in helping them to determine if this is a business they should invest in or not. So here's the thing. I'm going to take you through the criteria really quickly, and I'm going to recommend that before you do anything, before you talk to anybody, use this criteria to develop a model for your target investor avatar, the perfect target example of the person that you should be talking to that would be most likely to invest in your business. And here's where you start. Number one, you want to know, what is this person's background in terms of where have they made their money? So, for example, if I take a technology deal to a real estate investor that's made all their money in a real estate investor, it's not a good match, right? Number one, they're not going to know how to evaluate the deal. They're not going to know if the deal is working for them. And if they put money into the deal, they're not going to be a good investor for you. And the reason is they're always going to be nervous. They're going to be a nervous investor. And the reason is, if things aren't working out, they're not going to know how to step in and fix it. And so that creates a lot of concern and a lot of issues. So if I got a tech deal, I'm going to a tech investor. But more specifically, if I have a med tech or a fintech deal, I'm going to a med tech or a fintech investor. If my real estate investment is around notes, I'm looking for people that invest in notes. So get very clear about where this person has made their money and the kind of things they invest in. That's number one. Number two, you want to find out, what stage does this person typically invest at? So some people like to get in the very early stage. They like the idea stage. Other people like to get in much further down the road, like at the stage where a company already has a product, it's in the market, it has customers, it has revenue. And so you want to make sure that you're talking to somebody that invests in companies at your stage. Because here's the thing. You may have the best idea on the planet, and they may agree. But if you're at the wrong stage, it's the wrong match. It's not going to happen as long as you try and will it. Number three, you want to figure out, what is the average investment that this person makes in a deal. If you go and ask somebody for $1 million, but they typically invest $10,000, you have a problem. If you ask for 10 and they typically invest, their mandate is to invest a minimum of $1 million, again, you have a disconnect. So let's figure out exactly what these people invest in their typical deal. The next thing, number four, that you want to understand is, what is this person's their expectation for their return on investment and the timing. When are they going to get their money back? And this is so important. And the reason is, if you go to, let's say, a venture capitalist, that venture capitalist may want 10, 20, 30, 40, 50 times their money back. And you may look at the size of your business and it's not going to get that big. It doesn't work that way. You may talk to other investors that aren't concerned about getting that kind of return. They want to, outperform the current market, the stock market. They want 10% or 15%. So you have to understand, based on your financial model, how big can this business get? And reasonably speaking, what kind of return you can give to this investor and over what period of time. And finally, the last thing, number five, is you want to understand, what is this person's decision-making criteria? Are they the only person that needs to be involved in making the decision, or are there other people that you need to influence? Now, if you do all of the, first of all, how do you find those things out? Well, if it's a professional investor, then all you have to do is go to their website, and the odds are it says it or there's clues there. That's number one. Number two, whenever I talk to an investor, whether it's a phone call, I meet them at Starbucks, whatever it is, I always ask them those 5 questions first. It's the first thing I ask. And let me just tell you something. It's like such a rapport builder. They so appreciate it because, number one, they know you got your stuff together. Number two, they know you're not going to waste their time if they're the wrong target. And number three, here's what happens. If you get through their criteria and it's a mismatch for your deal and you've taken the time to ask them these questions, 99 out of 100 times, they're going to refer you to somebody that meets your criteria.
Okay,
you
Scott,
just found the right person.
I'm telling you, I'm the author of the book, The Secrets to Raising Capital. I'm putting a chapter in there in my next edition of that book, and you're writing it for me. Because this is absolutely great advice. Look, I hate to do this to you because this has been just a great conversation we're having today, but we are basically out of time. Once again, before we go, contact information.
Contact information. Go to www.scottduffy.com or send me an email to connect, CONNECT, @scottduffy.com.
Okay, Scott, I really, really do appreciate you being on the show today. This has been great. Thank you so much.
Take care.
Okay. It is Mike Manahan, your host, Biz Rap Radio. You know, we're here every week on Biz Rap Radio, fixing the United States of America through a fundamental concept that individuals pursuing their own economic interests in free markets will create more prosperity for more people than can ever be achieved through government regulations and a planned economy. I'm your host, Mike Manahan. This is Biz Rap Radio, and we'll be back again next week with another edition of Biz Rap Radio.